From attempted murder to a misdemeanor, AOR defends a client in New York. How did we achieve this result? We got the full case breakdown coming at you. Stay tuned. This is attorney Andy Marcantel and attorney Marc J. We're the partners of the Attorneys for Freedom Law Firm, here today to talk about another success story with our AOR client. How you doing today, Marc?
Dude, I'm awesome. I say this so many times, like these are our favorite kind of videos, but these ones here, I think really are our favorite kind of videos because it's not often, as you know, we get to talk about clients' cases, but every once in a while, a client says, hell yeah, man, put it out there. I'm happy to tell my story. Who's this guy I'm sitting next to over here?
Yeah, our viewers will notice that there's a third attorney sitting here at the table. I'd like to introduce our viewers to Joe Caldarera. He is our local counsel in New York in our AOR network of attorneys, and we have him in the program because he is so awesome at what he does. How you doing today, Joe?
I'm doing well, Andy. Thank you for your kind words. Thanks for having me, Marc, Andy. A beautiful state out here in Arizona. Happy to be here and happy to discuss the outstanding results we were able to achieve together for our client.
Welcome to Arizona, man. Yeah, you got to see the Grand Canyon yesterday.
It was spectacular.
You're not in New York anymore.
Not in New York. We're not in Kansas anymore. You know, I actually had an Italian dinner last night here in Arizona. The food was delicious.
Really?
I was pleasantly surprised. The Sicilian Butcher, it was called. You ever hear of it?
Yes, yeah. That place is pretty good, yeah.
It's right next to the hotel you put me up in. I was wondering if you did that because you knew it was so close. Or...
Look at that. A New Yorker comes out to Arizona and comes on record saying we got some good Italian food.
I'm
here.
shocked. I
That's
can't
amazing.
imagine I could get good Mexican food in New York. I don't know. Maybe.
Men's a men's.
Yes, so as you mentioned, Marc, these videos are pretty rare for us. And the reason is because we respect attorney-client privilege. And attorney-client privilege is really important. We've talked about it in many videos. Joe knows how important that is. A lot of times, understandably, clients don't want their case talked about in a public forum. But every now and then, we have a client who is willing to share their story with the world. And maybe they just want their story to get out there. There's an important lesson that they want out there. And we have such a case today.
Yeah, and to be fair, sometimes we have clients who want to talk about their case and we're like, probably better that we don't talk about your case. Maybe they're still finishing up on probation or something like that. And, you know, as I say all the time, we're lawyers first, right? Our first obligation above everything else is to our client. And that's what real lawyers do. That's our attitude here. As people know, we've been a law firm since 1997. That's always been our attitude. We're not about to change that now. But when the clients want to come on and they want to talk about their story and we don't see any downside for them to come on and they got some things to say and a few gripes out there that are legitimate gripes, yeah, man, let's let people know what happened here.
Yeah, I think so. So on that note, let's introduce that client. Appearing via Zoom is Joseph. How you doing, Joseph?
How's it going, guys? Good morning.
Great to have you on the podcast, my friend. And
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolute honor representing you in the case. I'm glad that you agreed to do this because I think there are some really important lessons that come out of your case. Obviously, the charge is originally extremely serious. It happened in New York, which we all know is not the friendliest jurisdiction to gun owners. That might be an understatement. But before we dive into what happened in your case, you were a member of a different program other than Attorneys on Retainer.
Yes, that is true. When I started doing more research and looking at other videos and other gun tubers and gun channels, there was a guy that I stumbled upon and he shouted you guys out. And the main thing that stuck out to me was that you guys would defend your clients even if we were charged criminally. And also in New York City, which is where I'm from. So a lot of places immediately wouldn't help you out if you're from New York. And a lot of places wouldn't help you if you're not immediately released from the precinct. I was charged with crazy charges, so obviously I would be considered a criminal at that time or in question. So a lot of places would just drop my case off of that. But you guys didn't. You guys obviously helped out because you guys are lawyers. So you saw it through the whole way, and now we're at where we're at right now. And I'm super grateful.
Yeah, that's a really important point is because, and people just need to do research on all the available programs out there. I'm really glad that you switched over. because,
Me
of
too.
course, there are so many programs. The majority of programs, many of them, first of all, don't even do business in New York, can't even
Yeah.
cover you if your incident occurred in New York.
Yeah.
Other programs will immediately exclude you if you happen to be in what the government has deemed as a gun-free zone at the time that the incident occurs. And both of
Yeah.
those were true in your case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
People don't understand how big this criminal acts exclusion thing is because, like he was saying, you don't need us unless you're charged with a crime, right? 9 times out of 10. And if you're with a company that could say, hey, we think this thing's a criminal act and they're going to drop you as a result of that. I mean, what kind of program are you in? And so not only do we not have a criminal acts exclusion, we actually put it right out there in our contract that we do not exclude criminal acts. Just got to make the case you acted in self-defense, and you certainly could in this case. But, it's another point, too, is they say you got to win the fight on the street, which you did, fortunately. But then you got to win the fight in the courtroom as well, because if you think just because you were involved in a good shoot that you are not going to wind up in court, this case right here, I think, is a great example of how you could definitely act in self-defense. And I think this was a pretty clear case of self-defense. Doesn't mean you're not going to find yourself at Rikers Island as you did here. So yeah, we'll get into the story, but I think that's a very important lesson right at the beginning for people to understand. People say, oh, I'll never be involved in a bad shoot. It'll only be a good shoot. Doesn't mean you're not going to court.
Yeah, and we have a list, as you mentioned, Mark, we have a list of non-exclusions. I call them proud non-exclusions that we list in our contract. You can put that next to some of the other leaders in the industry, and you'll see a list of exclusions. We pretty much based our list of non-exclusions off of our competitors' lists of exclusions. And one of those that we proudly defend people regardless of and don't exclude people for is when the government has deemed the place as a gun-free zone, which, as I mentioned, is exactly what happened in your case. So, Joseph, why don't we hop into your story here for the viewers? Set the stage for us. Where were you living at the time? Why were you in New York? And what happened on the night of your incident?
Yeah. So I grew up in New York, born and raised. I moved to Florida during COVID with my father and my family. Well, originally with my wife first. Then my father moved down to open up our gym. I'm an MMA fighter and a coach. So when I was in Florida, me and my wife were trying for a kid. And at the time, a brand new business in a place that's foreign to us. We never lived in Florida before. We didn't know nobody there. So at the end of the day, it was kind of like we had to build that clientele from fresh. It was, struggling at first. It was difficult. So finances were a little rough with the business. And I feel like when we lost that, we ended up losing our child due to miscarriage. And I felt like it was my fault because I couldn't get the clientele that that I used to always be able to get and provide for my wife and then to our future kid. So when we lost our kid, I thought that it was my fault. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna move back to New York. Have all my clients over there, have all my friends over there, all my family over there. So it's gonna be easier to make money. So I moved back to New York with my wife. We tried again, and thank God, this baby was healthy, and her pregnancy was going well. So I was in New York. We were struggling. We had to come up a little bit from starting from the bottom, staying with family at first. And my wife was pregnant, so at the time it was difficult. It was hot. It was the summertime. We ended up going to a homeless shelter, and we stood there. We worked our way out of that. Finally settled into our apartment. I was reconnecting with my uncle, who I haven't seen in a while. This is our time to reconnect. And he invited me and my little brother. At the time, my little brother was staying with me for the summer, and he invited us to a barbecue in our old neighborhood where we grew up in. And so we were at a barbecue. It's not the best neighborhood in the world, so people are drunk. Everyone's a little bit intoxicated, a little bit out of their right state of mind. So things happen. Emotions are high. Your judgment is low when you are under the influence. So certain people under the influence. I wasn't. Neither was my uncle. It ended up just getting crazy, where a big argument happened, and my uncle ended up getting jumped and stabbed multiple times. He ended up getting beat with canes, bottles, people, and it was getting crazy. So my main concern was watching my little brother, and then also my little cousin too, who was there. My little cousin's 11. My little brother is 15. He's 15 years old. And the whole time while this is happening, I'm watching my uncle get jumped, getting stabbed. And I'm looking, trying to find my little brother because he was kind of in the mist around the back. And I was just looking at him the whole time. And you'll see in the video, you'll see instead of turning my back, I didn't want to just run away because running away can get you killed. So I was shuffling out. I did like a military shuffle out of there so I can still make sure I have my balance, still make sure that I'm aware of everything that's going on because just in case anyone pull out a gun or a knife on me. And so I'm shuffling out of there, trying to find my little brother. I found him, start going towards my brother. His name is Matthew. And I call his name. As I'm calling his name, somebody goes up to me randomly, and somebody that I don't know. And he goes, "You got a problem? Like, what's up?" And I'm like, "No, I'm good." So then I just keep going to my brother. So I'm going to my brother now, and he calls me again, except now he's running at me. And he runs at me and he goes, "Oh, so what you got? What you got in your fanny pack?" Then he goes and reaches for his behind his pants, and when he reached, I didn't have a second to even guess or anything. I already know what that means. At this point, I already saw my uncle get stabbed. I already saw him get jumped, and I already know what time it is. There's no thinking at this point. Everything is off a reaction, and the moment he reached and said that in a threatening way, especially after the first time when I denied him and kept walking and kept walking away, I knew that he wanted to try to do something to me because, obviously I'm the next grown adult that was with my uncle. So, and the way things go is if you're with them, even if I literally wasn't even fighting with my uncle, I'm still associated with him just because we came together, guilty by association. So when he started running at me, full force, reached for the back of his pants. I didn't have time to think. I just pulled out my firearm and I let off. I engaged, and then as soon as I engaged, I made sure the target was down. Once the target was down, so that he's not a threat anymore, I found my little brother and I said, "Let's leave before they start shooting back at us." That was the first thought in my mind, was that they're gonna start shooting back, because I do know there was guns there. I heard people yelling for it, so I just want to make sure that they don't start shooting my little brother. That was my main concern. So I got my little brother out of there. I was running with him with my hand over his head. So while we were running, getting back towards my aunt's building, I had my hand over his head as we were running to make sure if anyone shoots, I don't know. I was just thinking they'll shoot my hand or shoot me instead of my brother. As we're running through, my brother, he calls the police. Um, he makes the phone call just to let them know like that something happened, just so we can get ambulance and police at the scene. And then immediately, as soon as we got to the apartment, I called you guys. I had the emergency hotline. I just called you guys, and then that's kind of how everything happened from there.
Yeah, I remember when we received that phone call, and I remember the state you were in at the time. Understandably, you were, very, very stressed and worried and scared and needed some guidance. And we sprung into action immediately, as we do for all
Yeah.
of our clients. We had the strike force jump on it that day. And that's when our good friend Joe enters the story. So, Joe, we reached out to your law firm. We researched some firms, and we already had some connections and everything like that. But given the proximity of where the case occurred and what we were looking for in the case, we like to customize in every single defense exactly who's going to be on the team, which led us to you, Joe. So do you remember when we got a hold of your law firm?
I do. I remember taking the phone call, and I remember telling you specifically why I was the perfect fit to be on this case. Being a previous prosecutor at the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office means I specialize in cases in Brooklyn, which, I know you're not from New York City, but you came out to visit me a few times, and you see the way things are conducted in Brooklyn. You've told me about the culture of the courthouse there and how that's very different from Arizona. I can tell you that each borough is very different. Staten Island, Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, Manhattan, each borough has their own different culture, right? Each set of prosecutors operates differently. The rules of warfare are a little bit different in each borough. So coming from Brooklyn, having my training and expertise be in Brooklyn immediately out of law school, that means that most of the cases that I handle for my law firm tend to be those Brooklyn cases, because I know how to deal with those prosecutors and I know what they're looking for as far as a proactive defense is concerned. In this case, look, I mean, it had the smell from the very beginning of a client who was not guilty. This was a client who we were going to be able to serve justice for. And you think that prosecutors are the ones who are seeking justice, but that's not really always the case, right? The prosecutors sometimes are just trying to win. It's our job to find justice for the client. And in this case, once I heard from you, and then I was able to speak to our client, I knew we had a winning case on our hands, and I knew we had to do everything we could to make sure that we were going to get him the desired result that the justice demanded.
It's our job to do justice. Amen to that, brother. And, one of the things that we determined needed to be done right away is preservation of evidence.
Correct.
The question immediately came up, is there a video out there in the world? This occurred, kind of near a business plaza. There's a business across the street. There's neighborhoods. There's apartment complexes. Was there a surveillance camera video? And so our first point of action here was to immediately get an investigator out to try to preserve video.
Yeah, well, within 12 hours of retaining our law firm to assist in this matter, we sent out investigators immediately to the neighborhood. We were familiar with the area. We went, spoke to a few bodega clerks, a few deli clerks, people over there in the neighborhood. We struck out a few times, and then finally, after like a third or fourth visit, we were able to find a deli owner who actually had surveillance from the scene. So we preserved that right away, and that's really, that was a big break, because without that video, we would have been facing a much more of an uphill battle.
Yeah, people don't understand how important it is to be able to jump on this case. And you and I had, I think, a couple of conversations at the very beginning. And I always tell people, I can tell in 5 or 10 minutes if I'm dealing with a real criminal defense lawyer or someone who's kind of phoning it in, who doesn't really, they maybe dabble, they've done some DUIs here and there, but they don't really do the heavy duty stuff, or they do, but they're not available to move right now because we know there might be a video and we need an investigator out there. And you impressed me in the first couple of conversations. I felt like this firm is really locked on. These guys know what they're doing. They will handle the case exactly like we would handle it on the ground, which means get somebody out there right now, because the government isn't necessarily looking for information that helps us, right? They're looking for information. They want to preserve the stuff that gets them the conviction. That's the reason why it was so good here that the strike force was called right at the beginning, that we got a hold of you right at the beginning, that you were the right lawyer who could move immediately on the case. That is absolutely critical. And like you say, if that doesn't happen in this case, he's still sitting at Rikers Island today.
Yeah, there's no way that somebody could underestimate how important it is to preserve evidence early on, like with this surveillance camera. And we'll talk about it. We have the video. We're going to play it on this podcast so people can see it, and we'll do a breakdown. But it's scary to think how this case would have turned out had we not preserved that surveillance camera. And people underestimate how fragile that evidence, that type of evidence can be. So many different businesses, for example, have their cameras set to automatically re-record over surveillance camera at 1-day intervals, 2-day intervals, 18-hour intervals. And so it could have been lost forever. And as we'll talk about here, the alleged victim in this case had a very different version of events than Joseph's. But luckily, we were able to preserve this to bolster Joseph's version.
Like you said, there's nothing that could substitute just jumping into action immediately. My law firm, the law offices of Robert Sigler, that's the way I was trained when I started there several years ago, is that when the clients call you up for an emergency situation, you need to take action that day. Whether they call you at 8 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night, 1 o'clock in the morning, you need to start making those phone calls. Because in addition to preserving the video footage, right, our defense started immediately upon signing the retainer. First thing we did, we reached out to the detective, right? We reached out to the precinct, tried to find the right detective who was investigating this case, and we're able to start providing that proactive advocacy from the beginning. We're shaping the narrative so that it's not just that the prosecutor and the state is able to railroad the defendant, our client, through the system without any pushback. We're shaping and tailoring that narrative, which if Joseph hadn't hired us before he was arrested, I think the outcome could have been very different. Potentially, I think he could have still been in jail today, possibly facing a prison sentence, because we were able to get the detectives and the prosecutors to begin cooperating with us from the onset. Now, that doesn't mean, when I say cooperating, that they were siding with us or that they were going to drop the case.
That took some time.
That took some time, for sure. But from the onset, from the jump, they were receptive to what we were saying. I mean, I remember meeting with Joseph in the precinct, and I don't want to get ahead of the narrative here, but I remember meeting with Joseph in the precinct and speaking to the detective and telling him our version of events. And he said, okay, well, I'm going to relay this to the prosecutor. Did that change the entire case? Maybe, maybe not. What it did do is it got me a phone call with the prosecutor from the beginning, and it made her receptive to hearing another version of events.
This is so important because there was a decision early on, right? I mean, Joseph kind of leaves the scene. There's an argument here. Maybe don't do anything. I mean, you could imagine a slightly different set of circumstances where we just lay low and maybe they don't identify him. But we had to make a decision early on in this case in terms of how to approach this. Do we sort of semi-cooperate? Do we go to them and be proactive? Do we wait till they come to us? This is why, so many times people say, this is what you do after a shooting. Well, sometimes, right? But you really need customized advice. That's the reason why Joseph calls us right now. We got the strike force. We got you on board. We're making real-time decisions that are going to affect the case down the road. If this decision is made differently, right? We're not proactive. We don't reach out to them. They have a different attitude because now they're trying to find a guy who's trying to hide something. If it goes to trial, that becomes a big fact. Prosecutor tries to make an argument about consciousness of guilt. You were trying to hide. Isn't it true? Now you're saying you acted appropriately. Why didn't you come in at the beginning, right? We have these kinds of problems. But we avoided that because smart decisions, customized decisions were made at the beginning.
Well, you guys are the professionals. That's the whole thing that I want that everyone should learn out of this is that I'm not a professional at all. Neither is anyone that will go through what I'm going through. So staying quiet and not saying anything to the police and letting you guys, the professionals, do your job was honestly one of the best things that anyone could do is just let you guys handle everything because anything can or will be used against you in the court of law. So even if I know it's compelling to prove your innocence to the police immediately and try to tell how innocent you are. But it doesn't matter when you're getting prosecuted, everything can be used against you. So leaving it in your guys' hands was the best thing I could have done.
Joseph, I remember when we were talking to you early on when we were in this stage, trying to make the decision on whether or not to lay low, simply lay low and hope they don't find you, or to actually facilitate a self-surrender and come in and tell them, you know what, our client, he acted lawfully, he didn't do anything wrong here, he was attacked, he's the victim. We're analyzing this early on, and part of that analysis is asking our client questions about things that could potentially tie him to the scene, right? As Marc just pointed out. What you don't want is for them to figure out who you are and that you were involved in the incident and them have to issue an arrest warrant and drag you into jail kicking and screaming and have to expend the resources to find you. It looks so much better if we're confident that that could happen to walk you in and play ball from the beginning. And I remember in this case, your car was the linchpin in our decision because, as it turns out, your car was on the scene and it was about 20 feet away from where the shooting occurred.
Yeah, definitely. The car was there when I came to the barbecue, I came in my car and I just parked it right there by the bus stop. So after everything happened and when me and my brother left the scene, we just left my car. Obviously, we're not going to go back to get the car in that environment. So yeah, that was a major thing. And then come to find out that when my car was impounded, I ended up getting some pictures from the city since I was parked at a bus stop and New York is notorious for giving tickets out just for everything and anything. So I immediately got pictures of my vehicle from the stoplights, I believe, and then I saw that my car was broken into and just a bunch of like broken windows. The car was dented all over, and I'm like, well, that wasn't there when I left it. So that was kind of like the I guess I'm assuming that was the main thing what happened to my car.
Now, I'm going to ask Joe right now to give a little bit of insider baseball to our viewers because this isn't something that you'll ever find written down in a law book or that they teach you in law school. This is the practical concerns when you are self-surrendering a client and kind of doing the tap dance with the police, where you don't want to incriminate them, you don't want to give up any important information, but at the same time, you want to kind of sniff out whether or not your client is on their radar. Can you talk to us about that?
Absolutely. It takes a certain je ne sais quoi, as they say it, right? Strike that proper balance between making the determination, should we surrender the client? Should we wait a little bit? How much information do they have? Look, here, his car was on the scene. These are New York City police detectives, the greatest detectives in the world, in my opinion. They were going to find him one way or another. What I didn't want to happen was them kicking down his door, guns drawn, a very dangerous and violent situation, right? He was considered to be an armed suspect at the time. So there's no way that they're not going in there, guns drawn to his head, ripping him out by his hair. So we needed to prevent that from happening. But additionally, like we were discussing, think of what a statement we were able to make to the judge after we surrendered him. We were able to bring him in front of the court and say, Judge, he's retained private counsel. He self-surrendered. He's not going anywhere. He's not a flight risk. He's not looking to run. That made the difference between remand and being released on
Yep.
bail.
Yep.
And reasonable bail. When a criminal defendant is in, you're backed into a corner, right? The cards are stacked against you at that point. So that means that all the advantages now go to the side of the prosecutor. He wants to get out. We as his attorneys want to do everything we can to get him out as quickly as possible. That makes for a precarious situation. So that was a key critical decision. Now, what made us determine that we needed to do this and how we were going to surrender him? Well, one, the car on the scene. Two, speaking to my client and making sure that he did in fact have a good story here and something that we were going to be able to sell to the police department, that we were going to be able to sell to the prosecutor, something that sounded honest, something that resonated, something that made sense, and making sure too that he was going to cooperate with us. Because look, I've had clients from all around New York who I schedule surrenders for, right, to try to do something like we did here, and they don't cooperate. They run, or they tell us they're going to be at the precinct at a certain time, and they show up 6 hours late, or they get to the precinct and then they try to run before the handcuffs are put on them, or they fight with the cops. So there are certain situations where actually surrendering your client could make the situation a whole lot worse. Speaking to Joseph, speaking to his father, we were able to evaluate that this was the right choice.
When clients like Joseph believe that they got a solid team behind them, that people are going to fight for them, they're less likely to run, right? It's the clients who run are the ones who I think feel, I'm not going to get a good defense here. I'm not going to get treated properly. And so they're more likely to run. Our clients don't do that because they know they're going to get a solid legal team behind them. And, this other part, it's just always fun because, people do this, I'm sure, with you. They want general advice that applies to every situation. And here is another example of, you're doing this dance. We're cooperative, but we're not that cooperative. It's like, we're not going to sit down and let you interview him right now, but we are going to bring him in. And so we're sort of playing both sides a little bit because at that point we didn't have the video yet. And so we didn't know exactly what kind of horsepower we were going to have on our side. But the decisions that were made were rational decisions that were carefully thought out by the legal team, turned out to be the right decisions.
So we were able to get him out on bond. And, because he's an attorney's on retainer clients, we assisted with the posting of the bond and were able to procure his release. But that didn't stop them from their procedure of having to actually take you to Rikers and process you and then release you. Can you talk about that experience, Joseph?
Yeah, so from the precinct, when I turned myself in, I went to central bookings after that, which is like, I don't know if other states have it, but basically it's like, I guess it's like the basement of the court. I think, Joe, is that correct?
That's right. It's a hellhole.
Yeah, exactly. So they took me to central bookings, how to get processed and everything, and then from there I went upstairs to see the judge for the first time, and then that's when I was told my charges. When I also got to speak to Attorney Joe beforehand. So Attorney Joe saw me beforehand, told me how everything was gonna go, what's gonna happen, and from there I saw the judge. The judge told me my charges, and then after that they basically send you upstairs, and then from there you gotta wait for the jail bus to come, and then from the jail bus they bring you to Rikers Island. They process you, make you have to go through that whole thing. And I was there. I believe I was only there for five days before I bonded out. And it's everything that you've heard of, that everyone's heard of. It's Rikers Island. Crazy things happen in there. A lot of things that you see. It is, a lot of people don't know if they're ever going home, if they're gonna get transferred to prison after that. So a lot of people have been fighting cases in Rikers Island for a couple years. Like jail is supposed to be a temporary holding place, but some people are in Rikers Island for a couple years, fighting their case, waiting for trial. So it's people are there for a while. So it was everything that you've heard. It was they had us. They didn't treat us the best. The correction officers. Not all of them are bad, of course, but a good handful were not helpful. We had people. It was the middle of the summer. We haven't brushed our teeth, showered, and barely eaten for days. They give us maybe one peanut butter jelly sandwich every 15 hours or so, like that, depending on when they felt the mood too, because it was pretty rough. Just a lot of hunger and things like that, sleeping on the floor. They had us in the bullpen a lot, so like you're in a cell with maybe like 15, 20 people, all uncuffed. So a lot of things happen. Some people overheated in there, got like heat seizures and things like that. and that was like the only way that the COs would finally give us like water and things like that. So it was pretty rough on that aspect.
They were treating you based on the original serious charges of attempted murder. And
Yeah, yeah.
I remember you telling me stories about because of what you were charged with, the guards were treating you differently.
Yeah, yeah. I had a few guards. I had three to be exact. So two of them were just kind of poking fun of me, just making fun, like, "Oh, you're not getting out of here. Like, you going up north, which is prison, which is and the prisons are by Canada. It's in the part of New York by Canada." So they were just like, "You going up north." And then one of them, the one that actually got to me, was a CO that actually was cool. He was a good guy. He was there talking with all of us about business and just helping everybody, just try to get into a better situation when we get out. And that one got to me because the way he went up to me was very out of care almost, and it was scary because he kind of brought reality into it. He said, "Man," he goes, you're a good kid, man. This is your charges?" And I'm like, "Yeah, man, this is New York for you." And he was like, "Oof." He's like, "I pray you have a good lawyer, man. I'm really praying for you." Because he goes, "You might not see home." And he's like, "You have a family?" I said, "Yeah, I got a wife and a daughter." He literally just like, he kind of like teared up a little bit. And that one hit me the most because he wasn't just making fun of me. He actually cared. And that one definitely made me feel like I was never going home. I was there for, I think, like I said, 5 days or so. But I didn't think I was going home. So every night I was sleep, I'm like, I'm staying here. But until I got woken up in the middle of the night. I think it was like 5 a.m. or 4 a.m. And and they said, "Hey, you going home?" And I'm like, "No way, I'm going home right now." And they were like, "Hey, you going home? Someone bonded you out." And then he was like, "They must really love you." And I was like, that was the best feeling in the world. I went downstairs and they put you back in like the intake section, and you gotta wait there. And I'm like, I'm just antsy. I'm shadow boxing. I'm doing push-ups. I was just antsy. I had so much energy. I just wanted to go home, kiss my wife on the lips, kiss my daughter on the lips. And it was just the best feeling when I once they transferred me to the back to the bus out of Rikers Island, and my father and my wife were there waiting for me. Man, that was rough because I just didn't think I was going home. Like I said, I was only there a couple days, but when you think you're not going home, like the charges I had, attempted murder, assault in the first, reckless endangerment, gun possession, things like that. They hold high in a lot of years in New York City. So thinking I'm not coming home, it was definitely like that feeling was uncomparable. I mean, there's nothing better than seeing your family, you know, um, in a good way, surprised in a good way.
You know how I'm wondering when you're in your lowest point in there, right? When these first two guys are talking to you about, man, you ain't going home and this and that. I wonder how much comfort you get. And I think people underestimate this. At least I know I got a team of lawyers who are out there on the outside who are going to go to the mat and fight and bring. This isn't a time when you want to be sitting there thinking, man, I hope they don't drop me. I hope they don't
Yeah.
screw me over. It's not a question of how much am I paying a month and to get into the program. Like
No.
you want a team that you feel confident in is gonna have your back when the shit hits the fan, like it
Yeah.
did for you. And so, how much like peace did that give you in your head to at least know there's a team out there?
It was honestly the only piece because that's the difference between me and a lot of other people in Rikers Island. Remember,
Yeah.
not everybody is actually guilty. There's a lot of people fighting the same thing that I was fighting. They just didn't have the team that I had or the support that I had. I'm more than God bless me with an amazing family. I've been with my wife for almost 10 years. We've been married for 5 years, and I have the best wife in the world. I got the best father in the world, and I had the best team in the world. I had you guys. So I had a team unlike no other. It was like the Avengers. So like honestly, it was something that I had that confidence that other people didn't, and that was another reason why I really wanted to do this podcast was because I almost feel like a survivor's guilt a little bit, knowing that there's gonna be people being sentenced to the rest of their adult life in prison for the same thing that I did, and I believe they were innocent. I spoke to a lot of people when we were in the bullpen downstairs in court. A lot of people would come downstairs and we would just cry together. A lot of these are tough. These are people in jail. Like this is people that some of them are gang members, some of them not, and they would come downstairs after they got sent back because they obviously they didn't have the money for proper lawyers and things like that, and they would come downstairs and we'd all just cry together. Like even people from opposite gangs. There was people in there that and we'd all cry, hug, pray together, and it was something that just killed me. And then when I got released, it almost like I felt good, but it was a bittersweet emotion because I'm leaving a lot of people in here that I know were innocent, that were just defending themselves, and it just kills me. And that's why I believe lawyers are like real life superheroes, because you can give people a chance to really like get a second chance in life that they need, man. Like it was hard. Like it was hard seeing grown men cry the way that they cried, hearing that yelp cries, like a scream almost, coming out of a grown man is it's just not something you want to hear. And I heard that too much in there, and it's rough, you know. Like I definitely feel like that guilt that I shouldn't be out right now.
But dude,
but thank God I has a team.
as lawyers, how does that make you feel, man?
Makes me feel strong.
Feel. No, that's why we do this stuff.
That's why we do what we do, man.
This stuff. I mean, just as you're talking, man, I can just warms my heart to know like only criminal defense lawyers can do this job. And yeah, that's how we feel. Like you're in the bowels, the beast has got you. There ain't nothing you can do at that point. We know it's on us. It's like a football game, man. The football has been handed to us. We got to take it and run with it. We can't fumble. We can't screw up. And this was just, for us, this is what we live for as criminal defense lawyers.
Joseph, that was really heavy. Thank you for sharing that. I know it's not pleasant to think about, but I think it's so important to help people visualize. I mean, it's one thing to talk about being taken to jail following a self-defense incident and being charged with a felony, but to actually live through it, to actually be in that position, to actually wonder, my whole life hanging in the balance, what's going to happen to me? I appreciate you sharing that, man.
Yeah, no problem, man. It's true.
So after the project of getting you out of custody was completed, it was time for us to spring into action on the legal defenses. We had already set the table really nice with the help of Joe to help get the more favorable reactions from both the DA's office and the police. And now it was time to do a legal analysis. We had the video in hand. I know our audience has been waiting for us to play the video. I'm going to play it. But before we do, there's something I want to reflect on, which is how different this case really could have been if we hadn't preserved the video. Because some people might be asking right now, why are you charged with attempted murder? And the reason is because the alleged victim in this case basically said, yeah, I don't know. He came up to me and just decided he wanted to kill me and shot me. That was basically his version of events. And of course, he had a mob of people with him, all of his friends, who were corroborating their shot buddy's story. They were like, oh, yeah, that's right. This violent guy just came up and decided he wanted to shoot our friend over there. And we all witnessed it, and we'll testify against the bad guy. And so going off of that alone is how they came up with this attempted murder charge. And it really took the video to refute that. All right, so we're going to play the video through one time, and then as we discuss it, we'll show some clips and zoom ups on it. There's a lot that you're going to see going on in this first playthrough, but just bear with us. Watch the whole thing first, and then we'll analyze it. Now, keep an eye on that doorway on the top left of the screen. The altercation between the bad guys and Joseph's uncle is occurring right now. And here they come out. There's punches being thrown. You're going to see Joseph backing up.
Clearly retreating.
Backing up. And there's about 4 or 5 guys that are confronting him.
Look at his presence of mind, though, right? To just make sure he doesn't turn his back on him, just like he said. Really good presence of mind here.
In his head, they just stabbed his uncle. He's grabbing. Joseph turns around, one shot, hits the assailant in the arm, confirms down to target, and retreats.
Yeah, he's probably retreated, I don't know, close to 50 yards maybe.
On multiple occasions, too.
Yeah, before the shoot.
So let's talk about that. And as we talk about it, gentlemen, we'll splice in some zoomed up and slowed down versions. But in a nutshell, this video doesn't show the stabbing or beating of the uncle that has already occurred kind of around the corner. But when they emerge, there are people throwing punches. There are people fighting.
And Joseph, was your brother next to you there in that video?
He was next to me at first, and then when everything kind of went a little crazy, when they all started getting on my uncle at the same time, he kind of disappeared for a second. So that's when I was looking for him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's important to point out, when you first look at this video, you can almost say it goes in the category of, well, you shouldn't bring a firearm to a fist fight, right? Because you see what looks like a fist fight going on, and one guy pulls out a gun and shoots another guy. But what you don't see in this video, is the stabbing and all the other stuff, that what you might call a risk of serious physical. In fact, serious physical injury was already inflicted at the time. And so Joseph is already aware that knives are out. He knows in advance other people have firearms. So all that's going on. And then you have a crowd of people who are pursuing him. It's not just one person. So we have really good arguments here that this is a clean shoot, right?
Yeah, the old adage of don't bring a gun to a fist fight is meant to convey a certain principle, which is that whatever force you use has to be proportionate. But there are numerous examples where it is okay to bring a gun to a fist fight legally. One of those is if you're completely surrounded such that all these people can gang up on you and beat you to death. Another such example is if in your mind you believe that there's a high probability that this person is armed, even if you're mistaken about that fact. We call this the mens rea of the person who is being charged with the crime. And surely at that point, Joseph, you must have believed that these people were armed and dangerous based on what you just saw happen to your uncle.
Yeah, for sure. 1,000%.
Yeah, Joseph believes this clearly, subjectively. And importantly, we think a jury would conclude that a reasonable person in Joseph's position would conclude that he was at an imminent risk of, if not death, at least serious physical injury, right? That's going to be the charge to the jury at the end of the day. And when you see this video, it sure looks like a reasonable person. I mean, you'd have to be pretty crazy to not think that he wasn't at an imminent risk of death or serious physical injury at that point.
Yeah, and you retreat multiple times. It should be noted that New York, this jurisdiction actually is one of the minority of states that requires you to attempt to retreat, which we don't have it here in Arizona. It's not in many states, but it's a minority position in the jurisdictions, a duty to retreat. And it looked pretty damn clear to me, Joseph, that you fulfilled that duty. It looks like you retreated a total of 3 times, and they just kept pursuing over and over and over again.
Yeah, obviously, I didn't want none of this to happen. I just wanted to make sure my brother got out of there. So that was number one on my list, was just to get him out of there until, the guy just sprinted towards me.
So now that we had the evidence in the case and we thought we were very confident at this point, we had a very strong defense. Yeah. It was time to reach out to the prosecutor's office. Joe, tell us about our initial contact.
Sure. So, reaching out to the prosecutor's office, that's always one of the most intimidating parts of the entire process because you don't know how you're going to be received over the phone. And here, right, like you gentlemen just pointed out, that video is strong. That video helps us. But there's part of that whole incident that we don't capture on video. Right. And similar to the spin that you see on television, right, whether it be CNN or MSNBC or Fox News, they show you these snippets of politicians speaking, right, whether it be Trump or Biden or Clinton, whoever it is, they show you a portion of what it was that they said, but they don't show you what led up to them saying that. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't paint the full color. It doesn't show you the totality of the circumstances. And here my concern was, even with this video that I found to be very helpful to us, what was the prosecutor going to be able to infer and say and argue about what happened before? Because I do think this was strong defense evidence, but I also think it was very dependent on what was coupled with it, what happened before. Meaning, were they going to believe this whole violent situation occurred and you really had the reasonable belief that your life was at risk? Now, from that video, yes, I think a jury could infer that it was reasonable for you to believe that your life was at risk, but I don't know if definitively they would have without knowing the full version of events in the previous part of that story. And in this case, that was where I needed to target immediately to defend you and to start putting our story forth to the prosecutor. I had known what the video was going to show, and I can't recall if the prosecutor had seen the video at this point or not, but I needed to define for them what led you to have to run out of that complex in the first place, what led to that fight. And the first few conversations were a little rough. This is an attempted murder charge. He shot somebody. He had a gun. He shouldn't have had the gun in the first place. They were chasing him. There were no guns drawn. But then as we continued to push and to press and to explain to them the totality of the situation, they began to be more receptive. And they said, okay, well, let's look into this a little bit more. Let's investigate this a little bit more. And one of the first things that we did, Joseph, you remember I had asked you to get your uncle's medical records, right? And we got medical records, and that showed that he, in fact, was in the hospital, that he was, in fact, injured, that he was stabbed. We had proof of that. And we showed that to the assistant district attorney, and their whole tune started to change. Mm-hmm. And Look, in law, as you gentlemen know, regardless of whether it's Brooklyn or out here in Arizona, so much is dependent on the prosecutor. These are very powerful people with a lot of influence and a lot of discretion. Prosecutorial discretion is one of the most powerful things.
Huge.
And abused things
Yes.
in our justice system.
And abuse things. But luckily here we had a really good prosecutor, somebody who wasn't, in my opinion, looking to abuse the system so much and who was receptive and open to our arguments. Had it been another prosecutor, I think this could have gone very differently.
And also, Joseph presents well. I mean, and we drafted up, I think it was an 8-page document that we had sent over to you with a bunch of background. And Joseph is not a troublemaker. He's a family man. He doesn't have priors. This isn't a guy who's out looking for trouble, right? This isn't a thug who's out there looking for problems. This is a guy who's a family man who's trying to do the right thing. And his background backs that up. And so the prosecutor can now see a picture that would be a very different picture, right? If he's got 10 felony priors and all these other things. And so all of that paints a certain picture for the prosecutor.
And that took work too, because right, the first legal decision that I made coupled with you guys was, were we going to put him into the grand jury, right? Do you have a grand jury system out here in Arizona?
We do.
Okay.
Yep.
So was I going to put him in? Now, in New York, they say the expression is, right, you can indict a ham sandwich.
We have it here too.
They get the same expression. So they indict everybody. 99% of the people who go into the grand jury are indicted. The few instances where I have put my client on the stand for a grand jury indictment is in cases of self-defense. And sometimes the grand jury blows it out. Other times they still were indicted. I had to determine were we going to put him in or not. And I remember speaking to Joseph very candidly. I said, listen, you've got a good story. You're a good guy. You're a gentleman. But what the grand jury is going to see are those tattoos on your face. And I remember telling him that. And, I wasn't trying to insult him, but that was a serious concern of mine.
We got to deal with it. Yeah,
right?
We got to deal with it.
This is perception, right? So that's a whole nother layer of having to convince the prosecutor. They see him. They see his photo. They see tattoos. What comes to their mind?
Yeah, we're
Gang member.
We're not here to be politically correct, right? We're here to accomplish a mission and get people out of the grasp of the beast of the system in any way that we can ethically get that done. That's our job. So we're not going to dance around facts that are going to be important.
And one of the first things the detective has said to me was that he was a gang member. And I said, he's not a gang member. And they said, no, he's a gang member. On our, intel form, whatever they call it, we have listed as a gang member. I said, well, he's not. You'll meet him. You'll see. He's certainly not the gang member type. But that was a whole nother level of hurdles that we had to reach. So I'm glad we didn't put you into the grand jury. I think that was the right choice. But regardless, you were indicted because, you could indict a ham sandwich.
Yeah, this illustrates another really important point, which is that at the end of the day, we as defense attorneys, really storytellers.
Yep.
That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to construct a believable version of events that we can convince a prosecutor that we have a chance, a real solid chance of getting an acquittal if this thing were to go to trial. But not only legal storytellers, we're personal storytellers too. Marc, what you were just talking about is that important M word that we've talked about on our podcast many times, mitigation. Yep. Mitigation. It's the fancy lawyer word that means good guy stuff to humanize Joseph. They're certainly not going to look for that information on their own. The cop is not in his detecting, trying to figure out how good of a family man the suspect is in this particular crime. So that's our job as defense attorneys. And painting the picture of who Joseph really is as a person is so important. I mean, you just illustrated the cops had already formed a vision in their mind of who they believed Joseph was based on superficial characteristics. The prosecutor no doubt would have done the same thing, but we got to him early and proactively to shape that narrative around what we were trying to prove.
And unfortunately, unless you can afford to have a private attorney, unless you could have a support team like you did here, legal aid and public defenders, they went to law school like everybody else. So they understand the law. They understand the importance of good guy packages and mitigation packages, but they represent 300 clients at a time in New York City. They don't have the time to put that type of information together. They don't have the time to put a book report together. So some of the things that we were able to do in this case for you weren't brain surgery, weren't things that even required a law degree to be able to accomplish. But what they required was taking the time and the diligence to dot your I's and cross your T's and making sure that you were advocated for, like Andy said, not just on the legal side of things, but on the personal side of things, the humanity side of things, right? Like speaking to the prosecutor's humanity, speaking to their sympathies, to their mercies. That was all really important.
Being an advocate.
Being an advocate.
Yep.
Being an advocate.
And I was just going to make this point, and I'll add to it as well. trial, if that prosecutor doesn't believe that we're willing to go to the mat, that we'll go to trial, we're not afraid to stand in front of a jury. And that was one of the reasons that I wanted Joe and his firm, right? We need trial attorneys. We don't need attorneys who are just playing games and are talking. We want lawyers who aren't afraid to stand in front of the jury, who have been in front of the jury many times. And that prosecutor has to believe a couple things. Number one, we're not afraid to go to trial. We will go to trial. And number two, we might walk our guy right out of the courtroom, and you might have egg on your face if you don't settle this case or give us something good. And that's always critical. If that prosecutor thinks we're afraid to go to trial, or we don't have a shot of winning that case if we don't go to trial, they're not going to cough anything up.
For sure. And just the way you said at the beginning of the show, how you can smell a real defense attorney's defense attorney, and the difference between a guy who does trust in the states and represents his friends who got locked up for DWIs on the weekends compared to a real defense attorney. You can bet the prosecutors can too, right? Because they're dealing with us every single day of the week.
Yep.
I also wanted to, definitely wanted to say thank you. Also, whoever watches this that helped me write the letters, I wanted to say thank you to them, because giving those was definitely helpful. That mitigation package was important to this case, as you guys mentioned. I'm an MMA fighter and a coach, so I come across a bunch of different people all the time. Our head coaches that I have, which are my students, they're ex-military guys. One of them is an ex-Marine veteran. Other one's an Army veteran. I had guys that thank you for your service. I had guys that were that are lawyers. I have students that are police officers, firefighters, and it was definitely helpful to see for the prosecutor to see all the different types of people, not just like just a bunch of my friends and stuff writing cool letters about me. It was definitely important for them to see that I had actual people that were businessmen. I had from everywhere, from friend to wife to lawyer to military police officer write letters for me. So that definitely helped out. So I want to say thank you to them for sure too.
So we submitted all of this evidence that we preserved and collected. We submitted the evidence that they were assaulted that night with weapons. We submitted the mitigation package, and we worked on the prosecutor. And it was a long back and forth over the period of a couple of months. But ultimately, we received a very, very, very favorable plea offer in this case. You want to talk about it, Joe?
Certainly. So, I would say this was as favorable of an offer as we could get in New York City. The offer essentially was to plead up front to possession of the firearm, right? Firearm that was illegally possessed in the state of New York, to complete a program of approximately 1 year, to be on interim probation, as they call it in New York, meaning don't get in trouble, don't get arrested, do what you're supposed to do for a year. And then at the end of that 1 year period, that felony is going to be removed from your record. It's going to be sealed as if it never happened. We don't have expungement in New York, but often, people would refer to that as expunged from your record and be left simply with a misdemeanor, which in New York, it's criminal possession of a weapon in the fourth degree. It's the same charge as being caught on the subway with a pocket knife, for example. So, you're going to be able to now walk away from all of this with nothing more than just a misdemeanor on your record, something that's not going to affect you moving forward as far as job applications are concerned, or as far as your future is concerned.
Yeah, it's important to set the stage here, too. This attempted murder charge, they were convinced of that. That thing got dismissed, and so no problem there. And it just seems crazy to me, right? The guy legitimately was justified in defending himself, might have died had he not had his firearm to defend himself. And yet, we're still going to get the guy and pursue him on having this firearm in New York. I mean, that to me seems pretty damn outrageous. And that's what we were contending with, right? Because there was an actual crime here. This wasn't just use of a firearm. This is possession of a firearm. And technically, he's guilty of that in New York. You would think a prosecutor would say, look, I'm going to let that one slide, given that this guy defended himself and it's clearly self-defense here. But no, prosecutor's going to still want to pursue that. And that's really what we stayed on and we're dealing with, and what he's going to end up with a misdemeanor here at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's the most absurd part about this case for me, is that the prosecutor, the state, is essentially conceding that, yes, he acted in valid self-defense, and we're happy that he had his gun because he would have died or been injured as a result of this attack. And so we're going to give that to him and dismiss the charge, and we're happy that he had the gun. But we're not happy that he had the gun, and so we want something on his record. Luckily, we were able to push them off of the felony and get to this misdemeanor resolution.
Shows the absurdity of this gun
gun-free
control.
zones.
It's the absurdity of gun-free zones, and this is why they should all be abolished. He's a good guy with a gun. Everybody was safer that day because Joseph had a firearm on. I wish more people who were good guys had firearms in that spot. Maybe this whole thing could have been prevented. So again, this is a political battle that we would deal with in the state of New York. But again, this case shows the absurdity of gun-free zones and actually trying to disarm any good, competent, responsible people with firearms, because bad guys got the guns no matter what the law is.
And in New York City, the laws are so ridiculous. Even if you are a licensed gun owner, licensed to carry a gun in New York City, which is a battle to have to achieve that status, to be a licensed carry owner in New York City, where you could carry that gun legally, it's few and far places between, right? You can't carry the gun on the subway. You can't carry the gun in city parks. You can't carry the gun on a bus. You can't carry the gun in any establishment that serves alcohol, right? Pretty much every restaurant in the city of New York. So where could you carry the gun? Well, pretty much like if you're walking on a sidewalk up Broadway or you're walking down some side street, then you could carry the gun. But you better not walk into any establishment. You better not walk into any of these specific gun-free places. Oh, and wait, if you happen to be walking up a block that's anywhere in the proximity of Times Square, right? Times Square and the surrounding approximate 2 miles, oh, that's illegal. You can't carry a gun on those specific blocks because that is deemed to be a sensitive location. So New York City, with the recent Supreme Court ruling just a few years ago, New York City now has made it slightly easier to be able to carry a firearm legally if you go through all of the hurdles and the massive financial expense it takes to be able to get that firearm and that permit. But where could you actually carry it? In fact, you can't really carry it too many places. So there's a lot of restrictions in the city of New York. And I think things would be a lot better if people were able to carry guns legally and more freely.
Well, New York's going to lose on this in the long run, in my opinion. You are going to be able to carry in these places. But right now, you can't. And so it's a good thing for Joseph. He dropped that other program and wound up as a client of the Attorneys on Retainer program, because we don't care about that. How many times have we said, Andy, in videos, we don't care about that kind of stuff? And we had at least 2 of them here. Criminal acts exclusion, sensitive areas. If you're in a program that has those types of exclusions, you might have been dropped here and had absolutely nothing.
We go further than we don't care about it. We think it's more important when you're in a gun-free zone to have your Second Amendment rights protected. So, Joseph, what are your thoughts on the outcome of this case? I know it's a frustrating thought to think that you acted in valid self-defense to protect yourself and your family members, but still ended up with a misdemeanor on your record. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it does suck, because I still end up with a misdemeanor. My business is self-defense, so obviously it does suck, and obviously, I feel like I shouldn't be punished at all. But at the end of the day, this is the best possible outcome in New York City. I had the best team, and overall, with including my family members and everyone that helped. I'm a Christian, so I compare everything to the Bible, and this is like a David and Goliath situation, and it definitely felt like we destroyed the giant, because I'm with my wife right now, this is something that I probably wouldn't be if I didn't have the team that I had of you guys and my family. So definitely, as much as it sucks, the more I think about it, I'm just more than grateful that I'm home right now. And like I said, I get to watch my daughter grow up, which is the best thing. So that's all I care about at the end of the day. It does suck, and I wish that things could change, but, let's hope they do eventually.
As happy as we are with this result, we think it's an absurd result. That's a result of absurd policies in New York. Yeah. And we think all gun-free zones are unconstitutional and should be abolished. But as you said, given what we're up against in the current state of the law, that's what we as lawyers have to deal with, and that's what we as lawyers have to fight. And, as we're reviewing your case today and just kind of going through the whole chronology like we did in detail today, I just can't help but think that every single step of the way, there was a moment that if things would have gone just slightly differently, you could be in prison for a long, long time right now. Starting with, if you hadn't ditched the other program and switched to AOR right before moving to New York, that would have been, we wouldn't even be talking here. You'd probably be in prison right now or something close to that. But then there's, if the video hadn't been preserved, if we didn't make the deal for the self-surrender, if we didn't have the influence on the prosecutor that we did,
Yeah.
if we weren't able to preserve the evidence and convince the prosecutor of our narrative, if we weren't able to humanize you, if we weren't able to get the court on board, there were just so many ways along the way. Freedom is a fragile thing.
Yeah.
Freedom is a
Yeah.
fragile thing, and it's so important that when you're playing for these types of odds to have the best team possible.
And if we didn't get the right local counsel in
That's
on
right.
this one, I mean, it's not a matter of just get any local counsel. Give me some, man. We got to get the right team, a team that matches with our team here. People who are aggressive, who know the system, who can kind of fill in those little areas of things that we don't know because we're not local counsel there. And then we work together. And, you know, you said it earlier, like the Avengers. That's exactly what we're trying to do. In fact, I say it a little differently. I say we're trying to be the Justice League. We want to swoop in and really bring it big. I want to make sure that at any price, no matter how much money you got in the bank, you can't purchase a better criminal defense on a self-defense case than you're going to get as an AOR client. That's our kind of promise to people in our program.
Any last thoughts you wanted to share with us after going through this whole crazy experience? As we mentioned, you're currently completing your probation and getting that misdemeanor secured. What are your thoughts after going through this whole crazy experience?
I mean, man, it was just it's crazy. It's hard to put everything into like last thoughts, but like just more than anything, I just wanted to thank you, everyone. I want to thank God first, because at the end of the day, like I said, I believe that this was a massive David and Goliath situation. This was like you said, there's so many things that were fragile about this situation that if one thing wasn't right, it could have ended in a whole different way. So again, with my personal beliefs, I believe that God ordained this to happen in the way it did. Switching to you guys was just a miracle. And then so I want to thank God first. I want to thank my family. I want to thank you guys 1,000 times over. Like I said, I mean, if I could give you guys all a massive hug right now, I would. And yeah, I just, like I said, it sucks. But nothing would suck worse than having to see my daughter through a glass wall. So definitely this, you know, all I can do is be grateful. And everyone that is watching, it's in your best interest 1,000% to go to you guys. I mean, this isn't like a paid promotion. This is just like nothing is your freedom is something that's priceless. No money, no amount of money should be like a problem. Oh, I don't want to. No, just do the right thing. Go with these guys, and they got the best local counsel they could get. I mean, like I said, this has just been I've been super grateful, and that's pretty much it. But my wife wanted to say hi.
Hey, how's it going?
Hello, I'm Sarah. I'm his wife. I just wanted to thank, obviously, everybody who had a huge part in helping him not serve life in prison. Seeing him every day and knowing that, you know, he doesn't ever have to experience those horrible conditions or not see his family, his daughter that's literally less than 2 years old. I'm sorry, I get emotional over this. You know, it's just like, this means literally everything to me. He's the most selfless, consistent, mentally strongest, physically strongest person I've ever known. And the fact that he's my protector and my husband, and he loves me and just does everything for me and his family. I just feel so blessed that I'm able to actually have him physically with me every day. And the fact that we are on vacation is literally a blessing and something that I honestly would have never thought would happen if you were talking to me a couple months ago, going through this. But yeah, I'm just very grateful. And, you know, this has been one of the hardest things in our lives. And the fact that we actually got through this, thank God, thank you guys. This just means more than life to me, honestly. And I, you know, to everyone listening and to everyone that's helped, thank you. You know, I pray that everyone keeps voting for the right people and to protect our Second Amendment right, you know. Please keep on donating to, you know, those types of organizations, you know, to promote that, because you know, you should be able to protect yourself no matter what. And I'm just very, very grateful that you know, we are here where we are today, and it could have been a lot worse. I don't, you know, just one last thing, I'm kind of going on a rant, but I don't want anyone to believe what the media has said about him to paint him as this monster that, you know, New York has, I feel like, has done. Like I said, he's the most loving person, the most consistent person, the most selfless person to his family, to everyone that he meets. He is just always trying to help spread whatever knowledge that he can and advice that he can to help people. And that's just what, you know, people need to know and see, and not just go off of appearance. And I just really felt the need to say that. But anyway, I don't want to take too much time. Thank you guys.
Well, I know I speak on behalf of all the lawyers here, but not only the lawyers, all of our paralegals and staff, that it was our honor to represent Joseph and help your family. It's not beyond us. We deal with these types of things all the time, and it's not beyond us that there are so many people's lives who are affected, who are immediately close to our client. They have family members, they have friends, they have people who are relying on them. And yeah, I mean, I don't know how to put it any better than it was our true honor to do that in his case.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
You're very welcome, man. Joe, I wanted to give you one last chance to plug your law firm and tell people
how
about
to get a hold of you guys.
Sure. So I work for Mr. Robert Sigler, based out of New York City, 299 Broadway, New York, New York. Robert is a visionary in everything that he does in the creation of his law firm and the attorneys that he hires. He leaves no stone left unturned. He pays great attention to detail and a particular interest in each and every single one of the clients that we represent. And you can see, like Andy just said, thanks to the paralegals and staff that help from Attorneys from Freedom, but also the paralegals and the staff and the attorneys who work for us at Robert Sigler's office. Just an incredible team who are really dedicated to seeking justice for Joseph in this particular case. So if there comes a time where you're in trouble and you need criminal defense in the city of New York and the surrounding areas, reach out to Robert Sigler's office. We've got a strong team of more than 12 attorneys now. We've got a robust criminal defense team that I'm honored to be the head of. And our attorneys just are relentless, absolutely relentless. When I interview candidates to come in and to join our firm as attorneys, that's what I'm looking for, is relentless, hungry attorneys who are going to do everything they possibly can to achieve the very best result possible for their client. And I've learned that from my boss, Mr. Robert Sigler. That's what he's all about. That's why I'm honored that he hired me in the first place about 4 years ago to join the team, because I think he saw that in me. And I try to look for that in all of the attorneys who are more focused on justice and more focused on results than anything else. A lot of attorneys out there, they're focused on getting the press attention, and they're focused on making money, and they're focused on winning cases. Well, yeah, winning is important, and all of those other things are important too. But the most important thing is trying to make a difference, and fighting for people who are innocent, fighting for people who are not guilty. That's it's remarkable. Like you said before, how does that make you feel, Joe? It makes me feel great. There's nothing more important than defending people's rights in the United States. Years prior, I was endorsed by the National Rifle Association in a run I had for Congress back in 2020. And, unfortunately, that didn't work out, that run for office. So I wasn't able to bring those values and that defense of gun ownership and the Second Amendment down to Washington. But I try to bring that defense to the city of New York and to my clients in every single way possible that I know how. And that's shown here in a case like this, where somebody had the right to bear arms, where somebody had a right to self-defense, a very precious right, a right to freedom. And I did everything I possibly could, along with the Attorneys from Freedom and along with my team at Robert Sigler's office, to get that desired result. And that's just an unbelievable feeling.
New York courts need more of that mentality right there, my man. And I can tell
all courts
all
everywhere.
Courts throughout the United States. And I can tell you, after working with you on this case, I can't wait for our next one, man.
I can't wait for the next one. It's going to be a good one.
Yeah, man, we were really honored to work with you guys. It's just awesome for us to have great local counsel. So when cases come up in New York, man, we feel really confident. And that's how we built our network. People who we've worked with who have impressed us. You guys are definitely on that list.
Joseph, thanks so much for being in on the podcast today and telling your story, man.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Joseph.
This has been attorneys Andy Marcantel, Marc J. Victor, and Joe Caldarera. Go and check out attorneysforfreedom.com to learn all about our law firm and how we represent people in the criminal justice system. Also, check out attorneysonretainer.us. Learn all about our self-defense program. Learn all about becoming a client and getting the protection that you need in your time of need. It's our honor to represent people throughout the United States and stand up for your right to defend yourself as a competent firearms owner. So go and check out the website to learn more. Until next time, this has been attorneys Andy Marcantel, attorney Marc J. Victor, and our new friend Joe from New York, all signing out. Peace.